the sunset, bills on my mindset, I can't deny it. Getting higher than my income's breadcrumbs. I've been trying to survive. The glow that the sun gets right around sunset helps me realize that this is just a journey. Drop your worries, you are gonna turn out fine. Oh, you turn out fine. Fine, oh, you turn out fine. But you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. You gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. I know it's hard to remember sometimes, but you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey, 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 hey. I got my hands in my pockets, kicking these rocks. It's kinda hard to watch this life go by. I'm buying into skeptics mess with the confidence in my eyes. I'm seeing all the angles, thoughts get tangled. I start to compromise my life and my purpose. Is it all worth it? Am I gonna turn out fine? Oh, you turn out fine. Fine, oh, you turn out fine. But you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. You gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. I know it's hard to remember sometimes, but you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey, 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 hey. Only rainbows after rain, the sun will always come again, and it's a circle, circling around again. It comes around again. I say only rainbows after rain, the sun will always come again, and it's a circle, circling around again. It comes around, but you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. You gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. I know it's hard to remember sometimes, but you gotta keep your head up, oh, and you can let your head down, hey. And keep your head up, and you can let your head down, and keep your head up, and you can let your head down, and keep your head up, and you can let your head down. Listen, oh.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever in the world you are connecting from. Although I don't think it's morning for anybody right now anymore. So, good afternoon, good evening, whatever in the world you are connecting from. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation about redesigning the workplace to make it more inclusive and equitable in observance and celebration of International Women's Day. And on the one hand, I know there's a lot of things to celebrate, a lot of progress, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge how much more work we have to do to finally build truly inclusive and equitable organizations. Work that is inclusive and equitable towards women and for all, of course, but in this case, in this conversation, towards women, which is the context in which we are going to be sort of discussing sort of the redesign of work. So thank you so much, everybody, to all the women out there, particularly to the women of HR. I just want to tell you before we kick off our conversation that we are sending you love and strength to endure all that you go through every day in life, and particularly all that you go through every day at work, fighting not only for your own inclusion and your own equity and diversity for you individually, but also for the rest of the people and the rest of the women in your organization. What a hard thing to do. And sometimes we say that empathy is about putting oneself in other people's shoes. I just don't think it's even possible for somebody like me, just by default, being a man, having the privilege of things that work because I am a man, and they work because just by default, they work for me. And I know that's not true for you. So putting myself in your shoes, it's already so hard, so difficult to do because of all that you go through. So I just wanted to tell you that we are celebrating you, but at the same time, acknowledging all you have to endure when you are trying to create a better workplace for you, for the people that work for you, and for your daughters, your sisters, your female friends, and it's quite an endeavor, and um, and I'm hoping that next year and the year after, we are celebrating more rights, more equity, more inclusion, more fairness, and not less, as it feels today versus last year, or last year versus the year before. So today we're going to have a conversation about the post-pandemic workplace, especially post-pandemic workplace, because of all the horrendous conditions that the pandemic not only created in terms of health for our societies, but also for women in at work. So we're going to be talking about the post-pandemic workplace, how to redesign work to be inclusive and equitable. So great conversation that we're going to be having today. Everybody who's connected online right now, please let us know where you are connecting from in the world. If you can put it in the chat, just let us know where you are. It will be awesome to know where everybody's connecting from. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions for this amazing panel, please post it in the chat. It's going to be a very lively, very human, very spontaneous, but also down to earth kind of conversation. So I'm hoping that you take away some insights from this conversation to try to apply in your own workplaces, whether you're a woman or a man or a non-gender conforming, whatever it is. Please try to take some of the insights out of this conversation to apply to your workplace and make it more equitable and inclusive. So anyway, please let us know where you're connecting from. It will be awesome to know. And I encourage you all to stay engaged and to be active part of this conversation. There is so little that we can do in just the 1 hour that we have available, but I'm hoping that we are inspiring more of you to redesign work. So without further ado, I'm going to be welcoming our panel of speakers. So if everybody's ready, please be ready for scream. I'm bringing you all on board in here. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. Happy International Women's Day to all of you. And I am excited that this panel ended up being, well, me having the privilege as a man to be moderating this conversation among all of you talented and wonderful women in different regions of the world. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask you a favor before we kick off. If you can please keep your microphones muted when you are not speaking, that would be great, because there's some background noise coming from somewhere. So thank you so much. Once again, I am excited about the conversation. And as you know, these conversations end up being or end up going in many different directions, some directions that we didn't even plan in our planning document as we were preparing for this. So let's just keep it, let's just keep it open, and let's just keep it flexible to, to take it in whatever direction we want to take it. So let me begin here. I want to ask you all to please introduce yourselves. I'm gonna just ask you to, just let us know where you're connecting from, who you are, your name, your role, whatever else you want to share with the community. And then from there, we are going to go right into the conversation. So who wants to kick us off here? And then we're going to be moving clockwise from there. Who wants to go first? Please just unmute yourself and go ahead.
I can go ahead and get started.
Very easy, because you're next to me on the screen, so very easy then.
Perfect. I figure I'd go first. I don't want to follow up some amazing introduction and then have to, live up to that expectation. But Jeanette Robles, as you can see on the screen, I'm the Global Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Archer Daniels Midland, or ADM. My pronouns are she, her, hers. ADM is a conglomerate of businesses across the globe in the agricultural space. If you haven't heard of us, it's probably not that uncommon, but we are in about at least 40 items in your pantry that you didn't even know was there. We're 40,000 employees across the globe in US, EMEA, APAC, and Latin America. I've been in the DEI space for over 20 years across government, nonprofit, banking, tech, and now agriculture. I'm based in Chicago, and I identify as a passionately dedicated Puerto Rican woman.
Awesome, Jeanette. Well, thank you so much, and welcome to the conversation. I am excited. I think we are three Latinos from in this conversation, by the way. I don't know if there are more, but I think at least three of us are, from Latin American origins. So fantastic. I think it's awesome. So Jeanette, thank you so much and welcome. Denise, we move on next to you then.
Okay, thank you, Enrique. Hi, how are you? I am one of the Latin members of this panel. I am connected from Chile, South America. Really excited to join you today in the International Women's Day. I have many different hats today. I am a university professor, consultant, and also I am a mentor for women and for startups. I have long years experience working for technology. I was HR lead for Microsoft, and I also work 10 years in telecommunications in Telefonica, the same as Enrique, some years ago. And also I had the role of Chief People Officer at Walmart here in Chile, being in charge of 50,000 people working here. So I have a long experience also working in the D&I space with gender equity, with people with disabilities. And I'm really passionate about looking how we can have a more gender parity world. As a mentor for women, I also see that women have a lot of potential, and we still, in the year 2023, had a lot of bias, of cultural biases, and we need to continue working on how we can give visibility to these, to be aware, men and women, about how this is still is avoiding women to continue progressing. And well, really very excited to join this conversation in the next minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And, I appreciate you bringing, of course, your very wide and extensive experience to the conversation. So thank you so much, Denise, for joining us. Sandy, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Sandy. I've been in HR for a little bit over 20 plus years, and I've done everything from admin, HR administrative, to generalist, to manager, director, HR business partner. And I am currently located in Laguna Hills, California. It's nice and pretty, sunny, as you can see. And actually, I'm originally from Mexico, so we do have a lot of that Latin flavor in here today, in the group. So, and I'm just looking forward to the conversation, and just what others are doing, and share kind of what we've been doing as well. So
awesome, Sandy. Well, thank you so much, and welcome to the conversation. Excited to learn from you. Olga, hello.
Hello, I'm definitely not from Latin America. I'm very much from the Netherlands, and it's cold and gray here, so very different. I don't have an HR background. I've worked since May last year in HR, but before I was a business leader, but very passionate about the future of work, and that's what I'm asked now to do for HP, to look at the future of work together with an amazing group of people from different functions, because it's not an HR topic. It is really a topic for the whole company to get ready for the future of work and all the aspects of it. So I'm passionate about that. I'm very passionate about learning. I'm a long life learner, so I keep on learning everywhere and from everybody that I can. So it's great to be here with some other talented people. And I'm looking forward to the discussion, and especially also the participation from the audience. So keep posting those questions, and I'm sure that we'll come back to those. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Olga, thank you so much. And I'm sending you some sunshine from my hometown, Flagstaff, where we finally are getting some sun. And, the snow was removed from the street. So it looks a little different today. So I'm sending you some sunshine, for your skies as well. So welcome, Olga. And last but not least, Karen, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Karen John Madsen. I'm the principal of Co-Design of Work Experience. I'm an author. My first book was Culture, Innovating Experiences at Work. I'm the founder of a future of work platform called The New HR. I'm an executive coach, and I'm an instructor at Stanford University's Continuing Studies program, which is enrolling right now. I'm an organizational psychologist. I grew up in HR, where I was head of HR for a number of global business units before going independent. So I spend most of my time in 4 areas. One is coaching and developing leadership in their teams. The second is enabling organizations to leverage their culture, DEI belonging, along with their employee experience. The third is optimizing talent. That's aligning people with strategy for business results. And the fourth kind of cuts across everything else, which is driving change management and transformation. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm based in the Bay Area, but I'm from the East Coast and I've lived overseas. So I like to consider myself a bit of a global citizen.
Awesome, Karen. Well, thank you so much for being here, and happy to have you in the panel. So welcome you all. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And I want to ask you, I'm going to ask you one question and give you maybe a second to think about it, and then I'm going to say something to the audience. As a man who is worried about, the state of affairs in the world, I look at the conversations we're having this year, and then I looked at the conversations we had last year, and I think about the conversations we're going to have next year, and it seems that we are making progress on some ends, and we are going backwards in some other ends, right? It seems that today we're talking about less rights for women than women had last year, and I fear that if nothing happens, or if we keep in the same course in which we're going on right now, when we have this conversation next year, it's going to be even less rights than it is this year. And yes, we can't change societies, and there's political processes in which each of us individually may not be able to make too much to change them, but there's a lot that we can do in the workplace. So what should we do? How can we create the kind of conversations that will lead us in the direction of having more inclusion, more equity, more rights for women in the workplace over time? And let me put it this way: if I asked you this same question in 2024, what would you want the workplace to look like in 2024 versus today? Hopefully better, than today and than it was before. So I'm going to give you a second to think about that. That using a little bit of the imagination here about how we can or how we might create better workplaces, more inclusive, more equitable over time, so that we don't go back, but we go forward. So I'll give you a second to think about that. And I want to go back to our audience, thanking everybody for being here. Please let us know where you are connecting from in the world. I know I see a lot of you letting us know different places. So please keep it coming. Let us know where you're connecting from. If you have any questions for this incredible and talented group of business HR leaders, please just post it in the chat. If you want to connect with them, I suggest you tag them on your comment in the chat so that they know that you want to connect with them. Because if you just say their name, they won't be able to find your comment when they go back to the chat. So just tag them if there's anything you want to tell them. So coming back to you, to all of you panelists, how can we create a more inclusive, more equitable workplace with more rights for women, for all, of course, but in this context, for women, so that next year the conversation is better than this year, and in 2025 it's better than in 2024, and so on and so forth. Anybody, please just unmute yourself and go ahead. Sandy, I see you right in there. You're muted again. I don't know what happened. You unmute.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I would say lead by example. Let's be the initiators of what we want to see. Let's go ahead and be each other's cheerleaders, because we tend to, for whatever reason, we tend to not want to help out each other to flourish and to blossom, and so just push each other, be each other's cheerleaders, and lead by example, I think would be some of the stuff that we can do to start actually making sure that we are, pushing those new initiatives that we want to see. Create support groups, create, like book clubs, things of that nature that are going to go a long way, or even simply what we did for our staff. So I ended up getting a blank card, and I used their name, and I put, like, let's say, for example, right, let's go with, I'll do Olga, right? We put inside you are, and then I used Olga going down, and then O, outstanding, L, loyal, and, I did it to where it was personable. And those things go a long way, as well as we ended up getting all the staff, all the ladies, we got them a bracelet, handmade bracelets to support actually a women-owned business. And aside from that, we went ahead and we extended it not just to our females, but we also extended it to the males. Why? Because they're also willing to support, and making sure that you are including those that are willing to support, because we all have a mother, we all have, or, some of us have sisters, wives, daughters, cousins, nieces, I mean, whatever it is. And if you extend it, it actually, I think it goes along, it goes further along, and it, it's just, you're planting that small seed that, can in the long run be a big, nice, beautiful tree.
Yeah, absolutely, Sandy, and thank you for that. And we have to acknowledge that there are very deep problems at work that are complex, right? I mean, gender pay parity, right? I mean, that's a very complex problem, but there are, and it may be, it's so overwhelming that it may be paralyzing, right? That, we may say, well, if there's no, pay parity, then we don't do anything. But there are many small actions like you're describing that can lead towards building that more inclusive and equitable workplace. And I especially appreciate that you're including men in this conversation as well, because it has to, we have to include them in this conversation. They have to be active part in building this inclusive and equitable workplaces. So Sandy, thank you so much for that. Jeanette, we go with you.
Yeah, I think that Sandy makes a great point, but I would say that's a yes and. Oftentimes, as women in the workplace, the systems aren't really designed for us to step up and take control. If we're not in a position of decision making, or we're not the ones with, in a sense, with the power in hand, but yet the onus is on us to either speak up, to look for that mentor, to look for that sponsor. It's kind of, the onus is always on us to be able to take those steps. We have to look for and demand, in a sense, the design of the systems within our companies, and across the board, for us to be able to have a voice at the table. There has to be ways, and those of us that do get into those positions of being able to speak for someone else that's either coming up through the ranks or laterally, we have to be our own advocates, but we also have to point out when it's not happening. We have to make sure that that when we talk to our leaders, have those conversations, that we point out some of those areas where we may have responsibility for pointing it out, but they have a responsibility for actually doing some of the work to eliminate some of the barriers, and that really only comes through analyzing of the data. Where are some of the sticking points where we're not necessarily being able to move forward? Analyzing some of the gaps of where we're losing women in the hiring process, where we're losing opportunity and mobility, or women disproportionately leaving the organization, and really kind of taking a fine-tooth comb through each one of those, and what systems are in place to allow us to continue to move forward. Because it's great to be able to support each other, but we have to make sure that the systems are in place for the organization to support us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And my next question will be around how to engage men in that process as well, right? Because very often some of those systems that are unfair and unjust are designed and controlled by men in those organizations. So yes, there can be a lot of bottom-up kind of pressure to change those systems, but we got to get them somehow on board in this process as well. And I will want to ask you how to do that, right? Or how to do that effectively, so to speak. So we go with Karen and then Denise, and then Olga in this round. Karen, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and thanks for queuing that up, Enrique. Sustaining progress has been somewhat of a focus of mine the last few years, because I have seen these steps back and realized how little depth and breadth that we've created in terms of systemic change. So I agree with Jeanette there, is we need to attack and I shouldn't say to hack, but I would say reframe and redesign those systems that currently perpetuate those inequities today. And yes, it's a huge scope when we talk about society, but business can lead for the greater good. There's actually a movement around that coming out of appreciative inquiry these days. So when you talk about, the systems, I would say start with the culture.
Yeah.
And any other systems that touch many people, because it is the thing behind everything and affects all operations of an organization. And when you say, yeah, men are in charge of those systems, we need to co-create that future with the allies and the communities we are a part of. And we can do that as individuals. We can partner with others as allies. So even though it can seem daunting to us, we can scale up very small scale change to have a very large impact. So that's my genuine belief, and there are ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up culture, by the way. I mean, all of these things require a significant evolution of our corporate cultures. So thank you for that, Karen. Denise, please go ahead.
Yes, I want to share two very practical actions that you can do in the companies. The first one is to make trainings on unconscious bias. And these trainings should be for everyone. First place for the leaders, men and women, of course. And if you can also have the participation of all the company in this kind of trainings, of activities, I think it's very important to start changing the culture, to start talking about new topics, and also to give visibility about things that maybe you never think about before. So I think that that's a very, very concrete action and one good point of start. The second one, it's to have metrics. Maybe a lot of this is invisible, you don't see. So if you have metrics, if you can compare your metrics of your company to the metrics of your country, other companies, maybe you can show the gaps. And that, I think, also can help a lot to really be aware that maybe we have an opportunity how we can increase the participation of women, for instance, in supply chain, or in other, I don't know, in the technology that are historically areas that have very, very few women and few women leaders. So I think metrics and the trainings on unconscious bias are two very concrete actions that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up this idea of also having conversations about things that we may not know that are there. There's so much to talk about conscious and unconscious biases and discrimination that unfolds because of those biases. And I don't know. I recently posted something on my LinkedIn about this, and there were a few guys, men, saying in there, "Oh, that's not true," or "that doesn't happen." And I'm like, that's exactly the sign that it happens. I mean, that you're saying that it doesn't happen, right? I mean, that's a blindfold that you have to remove, and then say, well, maybe I'm not aware that I'm doing this, and maybe I am making decisions because I am not aware. But bringing those topics to the table is just very powerful, at least to get people thinking about them, right? So thank you, Denise. Olga, do you want to add something?
Yep, a lot of things I've already said, but what resonates with me is role models. So not only be a role model yourself in how you hire, how you speak, but also be a role model in encouraging difficult conversations, in encouraging people that might have hidden talents that normally would not be seen to be able to shine. Because if you have the same kind of way of working, the same role models, people might not be able to relate to it. So they also need to hear the success stories and the struggles of people that are very different. Because if you only have the same profile growing and being used as an example, then it's very difficult to relate or to even dream about it. And I like people to dream big, to really have kind of this vision where they want to go. And it doesn't need to be up, but something that is important to you. But then it helps if you have somebody that shares what he or she did, what he or she struggled with, how she had overcome certain things. So trying to get those hidden stories out, get those hidden strengths, and really making sure that we get stronger together, because it's not always easy to be diverse. It can be sometimes it feels hard, but it's so worth it. So I think we need to be open about it, that it's not always easy, that you will not always have the easiest path, but that it's worth to pursue it for the organization, as a team, as an individual, and then share honest stories with all aspects. And I could also relate, have women support each other, be indeed the biggest fan of each other, but also be the biggest critic, because only being nice will not help you, right? You can be candid and still be very constructive, but you also need to hear like, hey, this is something that you could improve, because only being nice is also not helping anybody. So finding the balance between constructive criticism and some kind, candid conversations, I think is important.
Yeah, and we can do that with kindness and compassion, right? And
Yes.
elevate the conversation and elevate the quality of the culture in the workplace for everybody. Talking about that actually, and Olga, I may want to start with you and then go from there. Anybody who wants to sort of chime in here, but we're talking for everybody. We're talking about the post-pandemic workplace, making the workplace more inclusive and equitable, right? And to make the workplace more inclusive and equitable, we also have to sort of open our minds and our hearts to people being vulnerable. And what I mean in this case by that is that connecting to this thought of having men included in the conversation. As a man, when I want to be active participant of the conversations, one thing happens to me. I read a lot about how to, inclusive language and things to say, things not to say, or say them in a way that is respectful and compassionate. And I know there are many men out there, and they want to do the right thing. They want to become advocates. They want to become champions of inclusion and equity. I think there's a lot of fear that just coming out as ignorant about something may make them the target of, how dare you, how is it possible that you're like this, or it's your responsibility, not mine, to educate you. And that turns everybody off. That turns some people off, as in, you know what, maybe I'm not, I don't become that advocate if this is what's going to happen to me, if I show myself with vulnerability and ignorance about things that I'm learning about because I want to do better. So how do we build that post-pandemic workplace that allows for vulnerability, especially in the people that we want to also become champions of more inclusion and more equity, being men or women, by the way, because there are many women that also want to come forward and do more, become more powerful advocates, and they don't know how to do it. So how do we create that kind of workplace? And this is very tied, by the way, to one of the questions somebody asked in the chat about culture, building that culture of inclusion, equity, changing the culture, but also adding in there this component of vulnerability. So anybody, Olga, if you want to kick this off,
Yep.
Please go ahead.
I think at the heart of it is trust. There needs to be trust. If you don't trust your colleagues, you don't trust your manager, your environment, it's very hard to be vulnerable. It's very hard to speak up. And I think that's equal for men, women, for everybody. So there needs to be a foundation of trust. I think that is really important. Otherwise, nobody will ever open up, and it will only be, lip service and not really through conversation. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is, you cannot expect everybody to be at the same level, even if you do trainings and education. Certain things might not stick easy. Certain habits are hard to learn. So why would you criticize if somebody makes an effort, right? It can still come across in a wrong way. Well, talk to the person, say, hey, this is, I don't think you meant it that way, but this is how it comes across, instead of doing that on public. Why would you criticize somebody for trying? So I think be a bit kind to each other. And if you have something that is not working well, just have normal conversations. I think the most important thing for anybody that wants to make a difference, speak up if you see something that is not acceptable for somebody else. And again, it doesn't have to be aggressive, but what often happens that the opinion of women is undermined, that somebody is speaking over them or interrupting them. And if you see that kind of behavior, don't accept it. Say, hey, can we go back to speaker A because he or she had a very interesting topic I want to hear. Or, hey, this is exactly what speaker A was just saying. Shall we, him or her, allow to continue? So it's those little things that you really feel I've got a supporter, an ally in the room. I'm not alone here. And I think that's much more important than using exactly the right word.
Yeah.
Because especially in a post-pandemic world, people from a lot of different nationalities might all speak English in a Zoom meeting, but that might not be their native language. So we are all going to make mistakes, whether we want or not. So focus more on what the person wants to do versus the actual words. And then if those words really have a bad quotation, address that in a private manner.
Yeah, thank you for that, Olga. And it takes me back to something that Sandy said at the beginning, which is the power of those small actions, right? I mean, you mentioned one that it's so small, but it goes such a long way, right? Just when you have a man interrupting a woman that is presenting a topic in a meeting, just having that action of like, hey, I want to hear back from this person again, from Olga again, as a man or as a woman, but particularly as a man, speaking up for the right things is just so powerful. Or one thing that I have experienced myself is when there's a woman that has an idea, fantastic idea, nobody listens. A man says the same thing, and everybody's like, "Whoa, that's awesome! That's an awesome idea." Just letting that go, it's such a big mistake. And I've experienced people, I've seen people saying, "Yeah, but Olga mentioned that before. Olga, can you, like continue to describe a little bit more about this?" Because that gives credit to the person that deserves that credit. So those small actions, I think, are so powerful to building in everyday action that inclusive, that equitable workplace. So Olga, thank you for that. I think, Karen, you wanted to add something, and then anybody else who wants to, of course, contribute as well.
Yeah, thanks, Enrique. So I'll divide my answer in like two ways. One is when I talk about what's going on at the individual and team levels, it's about that allyship that we're like touching on here. And you talked about how do men essentially be strong allies in supporting gender equity. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of do's and don'ts there. And we want to make sure that allyship is certainly more of a blessing than a burden. And so I usually sum it down to three things if they want to be great allies. One is move from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. So it's not about us anymore, it's about others. If we get stuck and we don't know what to do, all you have to do is ask, what do you need? How can I help? The second thing allies can do is to take consistent action. Allies have to be allies all the time. It's not when it's convenient to them, episodic, where they happen to come upon it. If they are truly committed to being allies, they have to be that way all the time in everything that they do. That's how you build that trust that was referred to earlier. And the third is helping to drive that progress, right? So not being bystanders, but active allies and participants in making sure that you're working with your colleagues to drive progress. And that's being driven by these shared core values or a purpose behind the work. In this case, we're talking about gender equity. If that's the cause, then that's what you do. You help to drive progress toward that. And we're no longer bystanders. It's not enough to be respectful anymore. It's not enough to be supportive. You have to be active. And I'm not talking about you specifically, Enrique. I'm just saying those that want to be strong allies, particularly men who want to support the cause. Those are some things I would advise them to do. The second piece, which Jeanette queued up, thank you, on the culture piece, is exactly why I wrote my first book, Culture, Innovating Experiences at Work, because there was this whole frustration around, it's always the culture. Always. Everyone sums it down to that. And there was nothing there to provide the capability of designing, implementing, leading, sustaining culture. And so that's why the framework I wrote about, Design of Work Experience, is intended to provide that step-by-step how-to to help organizations at that scale to be more intentional in co-designing that future culture that they're looking for, the kind that supports and they can integrate into their designs that gender equity strategy that's specific to their unique context. So I'm sure we'll get into that later on in the conversation, but that's the missing piece here is we're doing a lot of actions that aren't necessarily tied to a strategy nor the specific and unique context that each of our organizations have. And so that's why I do the work that I do and why I'm putting it out there, because I want to provide and develop that capability to lead culture.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. Thank you for that. And I just want to point out a couple of things that you actually mentioned. The first one is that when you create an inclusive and equitable workplace, you're not doing it just for the one person that, or for for women, or for trans women, or for LGBTQ. You're doing it for all, including for you if you ever find yourself in a position where you need that inclusion and that equity down the road.
Absolutely.
And that to me is such a powerful driver here, right? Because it is, you're not doing it, just do it for you, man. Just do it for you. If you don't want to do it for others, do it because you're creating better conditions for you down the road, and you may eventually need the conditions that you have created in the past for somebody else. So that's the number one thing that I definitely wanted to come back to.
And your children as well.
Yes, absolutely. And the second thing that you mentioned that I think is very powerful, especially today on International Women's Day, is that we have to call out the bluff, right? Bluff sells, unfortunately, and there's so much bluff that becomes PR for companies saying, "Oh yeah, International Women's Day, this is awesome." But then when you go and look into the practices, there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of toxicity and noise in there that is not truly reflective of what they are trying to say publicly, right? So calling out the bluff and say, if you're an ally, you're an ally in, publicly, privately, you're an ally on International Women's Day, but the other 364 days of the year. So thank you so much, Karen, for bringing that up. Very powerful. Janet, I think you wanted to add something.
I did, and I'll keep it brief just because I know that we have a lot to discuss, and so many wonderful things have already been said. But I just wanted to add a couple of points and something both that you, Enrique, and Karen said that really resonates is that our allyship and what we're doing is the only way to be a true ally is if my progress is tied to your progress. Your progress, you only progress if I progress. And that's really, no one can call themselves an ally. It's like calling yourself a hero. You have to be given that title by someone or the group that you're trying to be an ally to. And I think Karen was the one that kind of mentioned the it shouldn't be a burden to me that you're my ally. And it kind of goes back to what Olga was saying. There's this fear of making a mistake, but we also have to put in the work. It's a different conversation if someone comes to me and says, I read this book or I read an article that said this and this, that really resonated with me. Is that your experience? Instead of saying, teach me your ways, teach me all of everything that I need to know. Read, watch videos, learn, and then bring that into the conversation along with your allyship and your support and your ability to speak up. So I would say that. And then when we talk about just culture and all these steps that need to be taken, culture can be measured. It's similar to how you measure representation and other areas where you say, okay, we're going to measure how many women we hired. You can measure culture through your engagement surveys, creating a belonging index, and then hold your leaders accountable to that index. The only way that culture changes or people start to shift is they really start to see the numbers in front of them, whether it's in black ink or red ink, to let them know where are the measures. Oftentimes our leaders respond to metrics and they respond to those numbers. Well, we can put numbers to that. And when we talk about belonging and we talk about inclusion, these are ways that we can put it very tangible in front of them and then develop a strategic plan the same way that they would for increasing their bottom line numbers. There are actions and steps that they can take to make that better. including talking to your people, asking the questions, and asking, how can I improve?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeanette. And you know, leaders out there may be thinking like, oh yeah, well, do I have to do all of those things? Like, what for, right? Just to be more inclusive for the sake of being more inclusive. And the answer, right, could be, yeah, just for the sake of being more inclusive. But not only that, is that your businesses are better when you become more inclusive and equitable. Businesses that are more inclusive and equitable outperform their peers in their own industry by becoming more financially sustainable, making more revenue, taking better risks, being more innovative, providing better customer service, looking more like your customers. So the story here, like you said, Jeanette, is not just do this, because it's the right thing to do for the people. It is also the right thing to do for your business. So you would be kind of like missing out on a lot of value if you don't do this kind of activities to build, or if you don't engage in building a more inclusive and equitable workplace. So thank you so much for that, Jeanette. Denise, Sandy, do you want to add anything here? I know
Yeah,
we're getting a lot of
I
different
have
directions
worked.
already.
I have worked for retail, and I know very well that the best buyers in the world are women.
Mm-hmm.
So if we design all the products and all that by men, we're not going to approach our best customers. So I was thinking about that. And also one of, I think that it's a very still going talent is flexibility. If we need to be attractive to women to join our companies, we also need to develop more flexible workplaces. I am amazed, in not the good sense of the I am really disappointed about all the companies that recently have make a back off, avoiding all the remote work, the hybrid work, and now they are working 100% in the office.
Yeah.
So that like we never had the pandemic. We realized that we could work remotely, but now no, we need to work like 3 years ago. So I think that's a very ongoing challenge about flexibility, not only remote work. I think also of having more free time, and also not giving also flexibility for women, but for women and men. I think that when you give only flexibility to women, you're still working on the same stereotypes that women are the caregivers. They are going to, I don't know, to send the kids to the doctors. So we need flexibility for both men and women.
Yeah, which, by the way, it reminds me of a comment by the CEO of a bank. I can't remember his name. I know who he is, and he says a lot of very controversial stuff. And he said, well, remote work will only work in our company for women because they have to take care of their families, which of course created all this incredible backlash because of the implications, right, of the explicit implications of what he was trying to say in there. So thank you so much for saying that, Denise. Sandy, do you want to add anything?
I think the rest of the ladies have covered pretty much every single aspect of it. I don't think I have much to add to that.
Well, thank you. I said at the beginning that this conversation could have gone in many different directions, right? And I know we had some questions, that we prepared for this conversation, but we have about 10 minutes left, and maybe we can, talk about a couple of other things. But one of them is, when you think about an inclusive and equitable workplace for women, I mean, for all, but for women in the context of our conversation, what are the characteristics of that inclusive and equitable workplace that do not exist yet today in most workplaces? What are things that you dream? Like Olga said before, I dream big, right? What are your dreams when it comes to the way an inclusive and equitable workplace truly looks like? And I generally like to ask this question about, using our imagination, because there may be some things that may potentially be further down the road and some others that are doable tomorrow. And I would love for our audience here to engage and to, walk away inspired, thinking, all right, some of those things are very difficult to do, and a couple of other things are very doable, and I can get engaged to make them happen. So when you dream about a truly inclusive and equitable workplace for women, what are the characteristics? What do they have that we don't have today? Open question. Anybody, just unmute yourself and please go ahead. Sandy, I see you first in there.
I would say, just make the space available in the workplace. Right now, not a lot of companies have that space available, where it's still somewhat taboo to speak about certain things. And it not just stop at, women, just, do a group for everything. I'll give you an example. Creating Slack groups, let's say, for example, for Latin people, right? Or for African Americans, or for, women, for men, for those that go fishing, just recipes, wellness, anything like that, that will help in that sense. And just having that space available for people to get creative. Yeah. And those that want to participate and join can join. And I would say that's one big one that I would love to see more of, where, more companies are willing to just say, you know what, I'll give you the space to be able to do such things. And it could be, creating, like I had mentioned before, creating book clubs that are specifically for women, or even just like simply making the space available where there's trainings that facilitate that for our leaders. Example, like mental health. There's people that struggle with mental health. And so you create that space where you bring in experts, and those that want to join. And so just having that opportunity, creating opportunities for every single topic, not just for women, but just if we want to make it diverse, let's really make it diverse and include everybody.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that those spaces, physically or mental spaces, are also safe spaces as well, right? Where people can have, challenging and difficult conversations that must be had in the workplace. So thank you, Sandy, for that. Karen, I think you wanted to go next.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was going to go, Enrique. So we're on the same page there. The one characteristic I would choose is psychological safety. That's not there. And that's something that also benefits everyone, not just women.
Yeah.
And it's something that is easier said than done, but also extremely possible.
Yeah.
So Amy Edmondson wrote a lot about psychological safety, but particularly during the pandemic, about what remote work or hybrid work has done, because it's really kind of blurred the lines between personal and professional, and it's brought in components related to bias that perhaps weren't as overt previous to that. So things like, our family circumstances, our risk levels around our health, those are things that we didn't have to worry about before that we do now. But the big takeaway in that was we can't just keep doing what we were doing. And so when you're talking about these CEOs that are like, let's just go back to the way things were, the toothpaste is out of the tube. That can temporarily work by its sheer force of their will, but they're going to come to a point where, they can't undo it. And if they want a workforce, if they want the best workforce, they're going to have to change some of those viewpoints, because the future of work is about autonomy and choice.
Yeah.
So I think very strongly that psychological safety is missing today, to your question, and something we can do something about right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to remote hybrid work, but we're having some conversations about that in this March series as well. So Karen, thank you so much for sort of bringing that up. And does anybody else want to add anything here? Just unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Yeah.
Olga, please go ahead. Yeah.
I would like to, because you said the future is really about autonomy and choice and flexibility. I completely agree. I think we hear that back from, women across the world. But I think it's also about meaning. I think people really want to have more meaningful work compared to when, with the pandemic, people really look for things that matter because they have choices, and they learned the hard way that life can be short and that it's important to do something that is meaningful. So I think meaningful work is really important. Can you follow your passion? Can you be part of something bigger? Can you contribute? And is there space, like Cindy mentioned, to do something? And I think the third one is growth. People want to develop, they want to learn, they want to have kind of a sustainable career over a longer period. We all need to work a lot longer before we can retire at a certain point. So I think that is important, that there's room for skills and development over time, and that it's not only learning courses. I love to learn, but many other people like to do something or apply it. So different ways of how to learn in the flow of work, with mentors, from others. But I think that component of meaning and growth, I think, is really important, especially for women. And then you asked as well, like, is there something that you can do short term? What I always hated in some of my, performance reviews is that men would say, "Oh, you're not confident enough." So confidence was kind of a badge of honor. That was the thing to do. And sometimes I was like, maybe I'm not that confident, but I am courageous. I dare, I try. And that is really something big for me. So I would, hope that people go a bit away from the confidence and then encourage courage and courageous, because sometimes you're not confident yet, but as long as you have the courage to try, I think you can move mountains. So let's encourage courage instead of confidence for a lot of the women around the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Olga. And goes hand in hand, by the way, with this idea of creating safety for people to do so and unleash their best self at work. I mean, what a best place to do it than at work. It's only that the safety has to be in place so that people don't fear about what could happen if they show a little bit more about their courage and their braveness, right? So, or their bravery. So thank you so much for that, Olga. Janet, Denise, do you want to add anything? And then we're going to move on to the last question, which is going to be a short one. I think it's going to be a short one.
No, I think, I have to like ditto psychological safety. I won't reiterate the whole study, how Google spent so much money trying to figure out, okay, what makes this amazing team? Is it having all this diversity in terms of backgrounds, and all of that is wonderful. But without psychological safety within those teams, the teams won't function at their top level. It doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. It means that everyone feels safe to disagree. It means that everyone feels safe to be able to, so it combines, it takes trust to another level. And creating that psychological safety only comes from giving those opportunities to speak up, and then acknowledging and allowing people to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because that's, and I think Olga put it best, we have to recognize courageousness. It's not always, I may not always say it confidently, but if I'm courageous enough to say it, then acknowledge that and make sure that there's praise around that, because there's no replacement for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a conversation recently in one of our events, and somebody was talking about psychological safety, and they said psychological safety is not creating a culture of being nice, it's creating a culture of being comfortable with discomfort, right? With being uncomfortable, because you are going to have conversations that are really hard, especially when you're getting into the human side of things. If you want to build a truly inclusive and equitable organization, you're going to be talking about stuff that's difficult, and you have to be okay with that. And that is when you're providing safety, not just by being nice to each other. So thank you so much, Janet, for bringing that up. So moving on to my last question, and try to make it a very short one, but if there's one call to action for everybody who is tuning in right now, live, or watching this recorded video later on, one call to action to create a more inclusive and equitable workplace for women in the context of this conversation, that you can expand it to everybody else, but particularly for women. One call to action, one thing that you would want everybody tuning in right now to do, to engage with, and to make happen, to create that more inclusive and equitable organization. What would that call to action be? One sentence, just boom.
Yeah, I would say conduct a baseline of your starting point we're so used to going from problem to solution, and we don't understand what's causing it in the first place. How are women experiencing your workplace today? Where are those priorities? And what is the least amount of work that you're going to have to do to have the greatest impact? Those are all things that you only discover through these baseline studies to begin with. So I would say do a baseline first. Don't just shoot first and ask questions later.
Totally appreciate it, Karen. Thank you so much. And it works even as you're progressing to compare how you're doing with that baseline. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Janet, please go ahead.
I would say start from the exact position to where you are. If you are, at the head and you're a decision maker, make sure you reach across and down and be an advocate, be a sponsor, be active. If you're an individual contributor, reach across, reach down, and be active. And if you're just starting out, if you're an emerging leader or someone that's really just starting off in their career or in a career transition, again, be active, reach out. It pays to engage. It pays to join your ERGs. It pays to speak up. So if I put it into words, the call to action is to get active.
Yeah, love that, especially when it can become very easy to be paralyzed by fear or just by thinking that somebody else will do this or will do that, right? And not me, and thinking I'm not the leader. So what can I do? So everybody can engage in action. So thank you so much for that, Jeanette. And Sandy, please go ahead.
Make it relatable, personal, and if you can do big change, awesome. But do not get discouraged if small change is the only change that you can make. Even the small baby step is a step. So just keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. Love that. Thank you, Sandy. Olga, and then Denise.
Keep it positive in whatever action you take and follow your passion. Then, the end result will be great.
Love it. Thank you, Olga. And last but not least, Denise, please go ahead.
Thank you. My recommendation is to look for the right workplace for you, the one you deserve. And if you don't find it, don't be afraid of being an entrepreneur. That's my recommendation.
Absolutely. Denise, thank you so much. Jeanette, Denise, Sandy, Olga, Karen, thank you so much for being part of this conversation, creating a post-pandemic, inclusive and equitable workplace in celebration of International Women's Day, but knowing that whatever we do to create that inclusive and more equitable workplace is not just benefiting women, it's benefiting everybody. So, if you don't do it for women, you just do it for you because you are going to be benefited for this as well. Hopefully you do it for the right reasons. And of course, for the, like Karen said before, for the everybody, not just for you, but for everybody in the organization and in societies, of course. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to this amazing group of panelists. I will see you soon in one of our upcoming events. So thank you so much. Happy, once again, International Women's Day. And everybody, I will see you around soon. Thank you so much. Jeanette, Denise, Sandy, Olga, Karen, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.